Nature Photography Day. Today is the 15th of June. It's Nature Photography Day. And we are joined by one of the wonderful photographers who we've had over the years come to take photos of Flower Valley Conservation Trust's projects. Jocelyn Conser has joined us a couple of times on Flower Valley Farm, and we're so glad to just chat through some tips on taking good nature pics with Jocelyn. Jocelyn, you're obviously a local Overberg photographer. From your side, you've had a lot of experience taking photos in nature over the years. What do you think, Jocelyn, is one of the main things that someone who is taking photos in nature should be focused on?
Hi Heather. Well, for me, I think it's capturing the focal point of what you really want to see in your photograph. It depends whether you're capturing a landscape, which means your whole photograph is in focus. So your whole photograph is going to then be your focal point. Each element going into your photograph, creating that depth, is going to be your focal point. If we think about more of finer details, sort of a flower or an animal, you'd like your animal to be your subject. That must be your focal point. That must be the most important thing in your photograph. But then you also have to think of where your background is, where your foreground is, and if those elements are complementing the focal point that you want to bring out of your photograph.
So Jocelyn, if we talk about a flower, obviously this is one of Flower Valley's photographic opportunities. We have sustainable harvesting programs, so our whole vision is around a fynbos future for life and livelihoods. Capturing those flower photos and bringing fynbos to life, as you mentioned there, is such an important role within Flower Valley. Should we look at some examples of how one can do that? How to capture fynbos in the way that you're describing now?
Sure. Let me pull up a photograph here. I'll pick 3 photographs of proteas. Yeah. So this first image that you see the background is completely blurred out. So you see the color of the protea and the shape of the protea come to life in this photograph. On this photograph, I don't have much of a foreground, but it's not necessary because we have the movement of the flower coming from the right. And then you see that the only thing that draws your eye immediately is the protea and the beautiful, luscious, pinky red color that it has. The way I did this, I came really up close to the flower, because if you want your background blurred, your background needs to be further away from your flower and you have to be closer to your flower. So come up close to a flower or use a zoom lens and zoom into the flower, which creates your background moving further away. In other words, being more blurred. That's just a small tip on how to get your subject to pop out and your background blurred.
Yeah.
Well, if your background is a little more busy, as we go into the field, you can't always isolate your subject. Your background, you can't really take your background further away, or you can't come closer. So this image I took in the field where this protea is standing amongst a whole bush of proteas and fynbos. So you'll see the background is quite busy, but yet I could isolate and focus on one flower. The reason, or the way I did this, is I came up close to the protea, but I also changed my angle. That's another tip. To change your angles, play a little bit with your photograph and where you stand and how you're looking at your subject. This photograph was taken, I went a little bit higher up and I was taking the photograph from the top, which created a focus point on the flower, even though my background is quite busy. So keep your f-stop quite low, which is your aperture priority,
Yeah.
quite low in the number, which is 2.8, and then you can photograph your subject still as a focal point, even though your background is so busy, by coming up close, and changing your angle sometimes makes a big difference.
Okay, all right, very interesting. So Jocelyn, if we move on to the next photo, on this photo, what you have done here is blur out the front of the image, so the material closer to the lens, and then the further back is in focus. Tell us, how did you do this?
Heather, what I did is, because in the field you can't always get to your subject without anything in the front. But what happens is when you have a reed or a leaf or something so close to you, it blurs out because your focus is a little bit further away. So I stood back just a tiny bit away from this protea, to get this reed coming into my photograph. Now, what happens is your camera only focuses on the flower, but everything in front of that focal point is out of focus, and everything behind that focal point is out of focus. So you can have so much fun playing with anything in your foreground, which creates like an atmosphere in your photograph. If you think about this photograph, you feel like it's moving. It's got a bit of atmosphere, and that's because I blurred out a bit of the foreground. So I almost made it a bit smoky, if I can call it that, or a bit hazy. The other tip I'd give is they call it rule of thirds. So if you divide your photograph into 3 horizontally and vertically, you get 9 blocks in your photograph.
Yeah.
So I would then, the blurred piece that you have in the foreground, I'd limit that to 1/3 of my photograph, either horizontally or vertically, or I'd put it into the corner. Whereas you see in this photograph, on the right-hand side, you have a blurred stripe coming down. On the left-hand side, you have the background blurred stripe coming down. And I kept my focal point on the middle third of the photograph.
If we talk about the rule of thirds, and
yes,
why does one do that? What's the idea around the rule of thirds?
The reason why we follow the rule of thirds is your eye sees a picture as a story. So you need to realize that when you look at a photograph, you either see something worrying you, and your mind thinks, oh no, that's not a good photograph, or you'll see the same photograph composed a little different, moved in different thirds in your photograph, and you'll say, wow, that image is quite nice. Thirds are easier on the eye. So when you're looking at a photograph, somewhere you need a bit of space, somewhere you need a bit of busy, and then you need to balance it out. And the rule of thirds kind of brings that balance into your photograph. So this image is taken. I've got the landscape, the whole landscape, almost on a third, with the mountains reaching into the second third, and then just to create a bit of distance. And then I've got 2/3 of sky.
So Jocelyn, in this photo, we can see as you mentioned, you've played with the light, also the upper 2/3 being quite bright and giving you that idea of space. So light is obviously super important.
Yes, light is very important. I think it's the most important thing of photographing anything. So if we move to the next image, this image is taken on the Zoetermeer's Vlei. It was, as you can see, it was sort of drought, but it made the most beautiful contrast photographs. So this photograph is taken just before the sun set. So you have this rich color coming through, but yet your shadows are not as harsh, because when you take photographs, either early in the morning, just after the sun rises, you get softer light. Your shadows are not as contrasty, dark towards light, as it is in the midday. I'll show you the next image. This image is taken at sunset, so you see a little bit more because sharper light coming through, but that's only because I'm focused on the sun rays coming through. And then this last image, I sat there waiting for this image. A lot of the times, patience is the key to the best light. So I took this photograph just as the sun went away and the clouds were changing color. But this image, I mean, take an image a minute later and it's completely different. So being patient and waiting for the right light is sometimes very rewarding.
So Jocelyn, here we obviously have the ideal lighting. It's so beautiful. Sometimes though that's really difficult to capture if you are out in the middle of the day and you do have the sun directly above. How's the best way of dealing with midday photos?
This photograph was taken around about 3-4 o'clock in the day, which is so light outside, and you also have harsh shadows. But what helped me here is a beautiful, cloudy, misty day. Those make weather like that makes for beautiful landscape photographs. It sort of creates like a softbox. It softens the light with all your shadows in your landscape, or flowers, or any subject that you'd like to photograph.
So Jocelyn, if you have any final tips for us on Nature Photography Day, what would you say to us?
Well, Heather, I think what I'll say is, my final tip is, take your camera or your phone, go out and just go and have fun. Go and play with angles, go up, down, close, from far. Just go and play and find your own sort of inspiration through nature. So go out, have fun, and take those photographs.
Fantastic. I like that advice. Thank you very much.